Evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to make a few administrative announcements. I am Sergeant Bob Scala, Police Community Relations Officer from Hefner Division. First of all, thank you for coming out for this very important meeting. And on behalf of the Oklahoma City Police Department, thank you for supporting peace officers. We need your support. It's critical. And we appreciate that community support. On your chairs, you have 3x5 cards to write your questions down, and we will have some folks coming around picking those up, and we will be giving them to our moderator to ask the panel. So we want to take the emotion out of this highly charged topic, and then we don't want anyone telling long stories with the mic, but we like some of their stories, but I know we want to be respectful for our audience. We have restrooms out to the right. There's plenty of extra pizza, so if you want to get up and help yourself to some extra pizza, please do so. Again, thank you very much for coming. I'm going to, but you also have feedback forms on your seats. There's two of them, one from Neighborhood Alliance and one from the Oklahoma City Police Department. We read each feedback form. Tell us what topic you like. Tell us if you liked the event. So we're continuously looking for ways to improve our processes, because we are all accountable to the people and we want to provide the best service as possible. And let me make a quick announcement about our panel. And I'm excited about our topic. We have some great subject matter experts and they have a great plan. It's not going to fix the entire problem, but I believe it's going to put a major dent in it, and they'll explain more on their areas and topics. So at this time, I will turn it over to the Executive Director of Neighborhood Alliance, Georgie Roscoe. Thank you.
It's wonderful to look out and see so many friendly faces, which means there's a lot of good neighbors here. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you, Master Sergeant Scala, as well. We have some wonderful extreme VIP guests here tonight. Of course, this is hosted by the Oklahoma City Police Department and co-hosted under them by the Hefner Division. So we have a lot of Hefner Division VIPs here with us. But from the Oklahoma City Police Department as a whole, we have Deputy Chief Vashina Butler and Deputy Chief Ron Basie. They deserve their own round of applause, so let's give it up for them. And then we have the Ops Majors. I don't really know what that is, but I'm sure that they know what it is. And then we have the Hefner Division Commander, Major Ryan Boxwell, who oversees everything at Hefner Division. We have also a lot of Hefner officers and supervisors in the Hefner Crime Unit, which you saw their cars in the parking lot, so we feel very, very safe here tonight. So let's thank them as well. Then we have the ones that are near and dear to my heart. We partner with the Oklahoma City Police Department every year on these workshops, and so we have the Neighborhood Alliance staff, which you saw outside putting things together, and a lot of volunteers that are working with us tonight as well. So thanks them. If you are a member of a neighborhood or homeowner association, would you please raise your hand? Excellent, excellent. We are the cream of the crop. So now the absolute cream of the crop, if you are a member of a voluntary neighborhood crime patrol or crime watch program, please raise your hand and everybody ooh and ah and give them a big round of applause. Yes. And if you are interested in learning how to be a crime watch or crime patrol in your neighborhood, just get with Master Sergeant Scala or Anna Herrera in our office and we will help you get there. Just imagine waking up tomorrow morning behind a gas station, no place for a toothbrush or a hairbrush. The rain got your pillow wet. No place to store clean clothes, so you're in the same clothes that you wore for the last 2 weeks. No place to store your medicines, although you have health problems. You have to keep them on your body for safety so no one can steal them. There's no couch to rest on, no chair to have your morning coffee, no morning coffee to even be had. You have no favorite TV shows because you have no TV to watch them on. You do have lots of remorse, possibly health issues, probably mental health issues, laziness, maybe, uneducated, that too sometimes, anger most of the time because of the situation you're in. You've never felt like you quite fit into life, and especially now. The unhoused have issues that most of us can't even begin to understand. I can hear some of your mind saying, get a job. But it's a long way from waking up behind a gas station to going and filling out a job application and getting hired. If you came here today to learn the phone number of where you call to just get that homeless camp cleared out and moved away that you have to drive by every day on your way to work, you came to the wrong place. Because once we have those homeless camps, the problem is big, and it's too big for just a phone call. It's a problem that all of us in this room, the City of Oklahoma City, the police department, nonprofits, and all of us as neighbors have to own. And then if we own it, then we can solve it. So we're here today to talk about the problem, because it is a problem, and all of us realize it, and then to talk about the solutions. Where are we going to go from here? You're going to learn a lot tonight about, and you're going to hear a lot about jobs, housing, education, childcare, understanding, compassion, appropriate giving, no more camps, and much more will be discussed tonight. As Sergeant Scala said, emotions can get high. You do not have to convince any of us of your opinions, and we don't have to convince you of ours. We just know that there's a problem that we as a city have to solve. So be good neighbors, maintain your energy, and let's learn together. One of the ways that Scala mentioned is you've got these cards. So as you're going along tonight, write the questions that you have and put them on this card. At any time, you can raise them, and we have volunteers in the room that will pick them up from you. Our host for tonight, and let's stick together and do it one more time and give a great big thank you to Master Sergeant Bob Scala of the Hefner Division that put all of this together. Our very first speaker for the evening is Major Dan Stewart. He's the only one that Sergeant Scala didn't send me a bio of, because he's like, everybody knows Dan Stewart. Everybody just knows him. So we did find some wonderful things about Dan Stewart that not everybody may know. He has 25 years of police officer. He's been a police officer for 25 years in Oklahoma City, and he is the Uniformed Support Commander, which includes the HOT or HOT, which is the Homeless Outreach Team. That also includes the Bricktown Entertainment District and Will Rogers Airport Division. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Major Dan Stewart.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here and excited to share with you what we've been doing with the homeless outreach team and homelessness in general with the police department. So when I took this assignment 2 years ago, I didn't know a whole lot about the intricacies of homelessness. So I took some time studying, and what I learned is it's complex. I think everyone knows that it's complex, right? So if we're honest and we look and we see who are we dealing with, we're dealing with individuals really that need our help, right? So there's always this thought of, well, we can arrest our way out of this. The people need to go to jail, right? It's not always the case. So if someone committed a crime, absolutely, that's why we're here. But what I'm convinced of is that we can deal with this issue through relationship. And what I mean by that is, so the homeless outreach team was formed in 2014 by the police department. And so it was a proactive thing that the police department did. We were being innovative. And then since then, it turned into, it went from like a proactive response to where they're almost playing catch up every day, trying to, handle things that are coming up. And so what we realized is that the city has homeless services, and there was a disconnect. And so what we said was, let's start working together. And so I'm happy to report that now our homeless outreach team offices with the city's homeless services, and we're all moving in one direction. So it's a very positive thing, right? So I don't want to take too much of your time because Lindsay is going to share what we're doing, but that's what we're committed to. We're committed to working together to help to address the issue. And I say address the issue because are we ever going to solve it? Maybe not, but we can address it in a way that we can help the individuals out there that need our help. Because I think anyone that's done this job any amount of time realizes that the people that we encounter on a day-by-day basis have problems, right? Whether it's substance abuse, whether it's mental illness, and we want to address those problems through treatment, through getting them help, getting them case managers, and all those things. And I think that's why what we're doing today is going to have some success, right? So we're gonna go and really make sure that those folks that are experiencing those problems get the help they need the best way that we can. So that's kind of where we're at. I'll be here to answer questions. You want to introduce Lindsay? You want me to introduce?
I'll do it. Thank you very much. Oh, you warned me against that. Thank you, Major Dan. I could never be that short and sweet in anything I say, I think. Okay, our next guest is Lindsay Cates. I just found out she's new to our state, so let's welcome her. She is yes, very much so. She's the Homeless Strategy Implementation Manager for the City of Oklahoma City. She worked at very innovative OKC nonprofits in the past, both Remerge and Pivot, that are both award-winning programs in Oklahoma City who have created partnerships and solutions around the issues of unhoused individuals. She believes that if people are seen, valued, and given the tools and support they need, they can change their lives. So please help me welcome Lindsay.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. It means a lot that you come out in the evening. Can you all hear me in the back? I have a pretty quiet voice. Okay. Just want to introduce myself again. I've been with the city going on 2 years. Homelessness services has been around in the city far longer, but we're really excited to share the initiative that we talked through on April 4th at a special workshop on homelessness. We know that this issue is challenging. We know that we are not going to solve it overnight, but the city is really committed in new ways for the first time to lead and to partner better with all of the nonprofit providers like Homeless Alliance and the many that we work with daily to do this and lead and change our community. So I gave a handout that I want to share. This is a summary, and the presentation that we did at the workshop was about 3.5 hours. So instead of going through 3.5 hours, I'm going to summarize this, and again, we'll be available for questions. Our goal with this initiative is to reduce unsheltered homelessness in the next 2 years by 75%. We know this is a big goal. And that isn't overall homelessness. That is just those that are unsheltered, living on the streets, those that many will be in your neighborhoods, around your businesses, that we want to focus on first. That doesn't mean that the rest of our system isn't working every day to house those out of shelters, out of different situations that they're in. But we are focused with this initiative on those unsheltered 500. So just want to walk through why this initiative is a little bit different. We have an initiative called encampment rehousing. And the idea is that an encampment is 3 or more people that are staying on the streets and living on the streets. And so what we're doing and what we've done over the last 6 months, we've piloted this 3 different times, is we are going out to those encampments. We already have outreach teams with nonprofit providers that we contract with that are doing this work, but this is different in that this is a strategic effort. We will work with 1 encampment at a time throughout all of the different wards of the city. And the goal is that outreach team goes out first, they connect, they're building that trust. Many of the people that have been on the streets have lived there for years at this point. They have lost trust in many systems, And so our outreach goes and works really hard. There's sometimes there 2 or 3 times a day throughout those first couple weeks to gain that trust and connect. At the same time, we have landlord engagement teams that are going out and connecting with landlords throughout the Oklahoma City area to find units. Finding affordable housing is becoming more and more challenging. And so we're excited with this public and private partnership that we're able to utilize funds not only from the city, but from private philanthropy as well to get those bonuses to those landlord incentives to hold fees, to hold those units while we have people in the encampments applying with case managers for those apartments. Many times the challenge with people that are living in encampments is they have to find a bus pass. They have to go to a different location in order to fill out forms. Then they have to go to another location to get documents. Our goal with this initiative is that they would have all of those resources brought to them. The outreach team is there, the landlord engagement team is finding a unit, and then the case manager comes alongside them to start helping with that transition plan to get them into that unit. This all happens within 3 to 6 weeks. We know that time frame is really quick. It's an intensive effort. We meet every day around the clock, finding out what are the needs of each of the residents so that we can get them housed as quickly as possible. We've worked with 3 different pilots and we've housed 18 people. 18 of 20 people wanted housing. And so that's one of the other things that I think is really significant, that often people say people don't want housing. Often people don't want housing where they have strings attached, where it's 6, 9 months, a year on a wait list. We're talking about when we can get people into housing in 3 to 6 weeks and they know it's their own space that is safe, they have wanted housing. So we're really excited about this initiative. We have worked with an agency that has done this in other communities and they've seen huge reduction in homelessness. We know that this is going to take, again, private and public dollars. So the city is putting forth money, we're using federal dollars, and then we have philanthropy as well as private residents that are saying, yes, we want to be a part of this. We want to help buy a move-in kit for somebody that's moving into their new unit. So we're just starting this. The goal is to launch in July. We've been testing again in 3 different encampments and seeing success. We know that working together and working differently is the key, but we also know we're going to need input from communities, input from neighborhoods as to how we work within each of those neighborhoods. So I just wanted to share this initiative. We're excited about what we're doing. We know there's a lot more to do, and we know it's going to take time. And so I'm happy after Dan talks to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's welcome Dan Straughn. Dan was born and raised in central Oklahoma, although he lives in Norman right now. We won't hold that against him. He's spent 10 years as a manager at the Federal Reserve Bank of Oklahoma City before joining United Way in 1987, where he was a vice president for agency relations and community investments. In 2004, he was the founding executive director to the Homeless Alliance, where he still resides in that same position, to build the community's capacity to be better, to serve better care for the homeless. Dan is regarded as a national expert on issues with persons facing homelessness, and OKC is lucky to call him our own. Please welcome Dan Straughn.
That was a very kind introduction, Georgie. Thank you. So that's Major Dan. I'm Lieutenant General Dan. So my name's Dan. I'm the executive, the founder of the Homeless Alliance. You each have a little one-pager at your seat that kind of describes some of the things that the Homeless Alliance does. Last calendar year, 2022, we housed 858 individuals. We had 1,886 people in our various housing programs. We operate Oklahoma City's only general purpose day shelter. We see about 300 unduplicated clients a day. And the day shelter serve breakfast and lunch, have showers, provide access to housing programs. Georgia mentioned that some people feel that people experiencing homelessness need to get a job, and some of them absolutely do. And so we have 4 social enterprises that we operate. Curbside Chronicle is Oklahoma's only street magazine. You've probably seen people in green vests selling magazines. Those are all independent contractors of the Homeless Alliance. There are copies of Curbside Chronicle outside the door on the table, several different issues. But one issue is purely about the demographics of the homeless population in Oklahoma City. So I'd encourage you to pick that up. In addition to the magazine, we also have a brick and mortar flower shop, Curbside Flowers on 5th and Classen. We have a snow cone business that employs homeless and at-risk transition age youth with brick and mortar snow cone stands across from the ballpark and in the Plaza District and here in Northwest Oklahoma City. And then Thursday night, we have a grand opening for our latest employment program, Curbside Apparel, which is a screen printing business. All those businesses hire, train, employ, and certify people experiencing homelessness. And then with that certification for floor design or screen printing, they can take that certification and work anywhere in Oklahoma City. I will tell you, when I started the Homeless Alliance, I did not foresee being a magazine publisher, much less a snow cone magnate. But you do what you do. I don't want to talk about the Homeless Alliance so much as the system we have in Oklahoma City. So in Oklahoma City, there are 8 overnight homeless shelters. And the residents in those shelters are not the people that you see on the street or in camps, right? They're in shelters. Our largest shelter, City Rescue Mission, with 350 beds, turns over their entire population in about 45 days. So what happens in Oklahoma City is every day people are becoming homeless. They attach to services, sometimes the shelters, sometimes not. And every day people are moving back into housing. And we have almost 100 government, faith-based, and nonprofit agencies that are working with this population at one level or another. So, and one of the things that's kind of unique about Oklahoma City is that probably 80% of the knee-to-knee work that's done with people experiencing homelessness in Oklahoma City is done by the faith community. So Grand City Rescue Mission is Foursquare Gospel. Salvation Army is, and somebody from the Army is here. There he is actually incorporated as a church, not a 501c3. Grace Rescue Mission in the Stockyards, wholly supported by the Capital Baptist Association. Jesus House, kind of get where they're coming from by the name. So, for decades in Oklahoma City, the faith community has been the tip of the spear on this issue. The importance of the initiative that Lindsay is talking about is when you bring municipal and state government into that picture, that builds the capacity of the entire system. In Oklahoma City, our point in time count, that's a snapshot number of people experiencing homelessness on a given night in Oklahoma City. And that number has hovered around 1,250 to 1,400 for more than a decade. It has not appreciably increased. But when you look at our annualized number in Oklahoma City, that number has increased significantly over the past decade. Until now, we're seeing about 16,000 people a year flow into and out of the system. And that's just the ones that we can track through our systems. So the fact that our snapshot number, our any given night number, has stayed the same while the annualized number has gotten larger and larger means that the system has gotten better and better. It's gotten more efficient, more effective, more compassionate, more caring. But we've gone about as far as we can go in making progress just through increased efficiencies. And so that's why the initiative that Lindsay is talking about, that we're certainly participating in, is so important. We can't continue to tinker around the edges. We have to look at the problem in a new way and come up with new solutions. And again, I, like Lindsay, I don't want to talk the whole time. I want to have plenty of time for your questions. So thank you all so much for having me here today.
Thank you very much to the speakers. Okay, let's get some questions answered here. Got a lot of really, really good questions. And I'm gonna ask a specific person, but if anybody wants to take the question after they answer, or if you don't feel that you're the one to ask to answer it, please pass it on to another panelist. But I will first ask Dan. Well, I'll say, which one? I know, Dan Straughn. Bearded Dan. We'll say Bearded Dan. Is it a bad idea to give cash to the individual on the street corner?
This is such a hard question, and I will tell you, I never do. If I feel that urge, I'll look for a Curbside Chronicle vendor and buy a magazine, even though I've got plenty of them already. On the other hand, my son-in-law will always give to a panhandler. He'll go out of his way. So it is really a personal decision. I will say that some people who panhandle are not homeless. I will say that some people who panhandle use that money for activities that you may not approve of. But some people panhandle so they can earn enough money to have a hotel and a shower that night. And I mean, there's nothing really wrong with that, right? So I really feel like it's got to be a personal decision. There is the issue, though, of encouraging that activity. So people panhandle because you can make money at it. And if you couldn't make money at it, people probably wouldn't panhandle as much. So that's also a thing to think about.
Anybody else have anything they want to say?
One thing that I think is significant that the city is doing, this is a different initiative than what we've talked about earlier, but we have worked on a program called the Better Way program, and that is a program that was out of Albuquerque, and then Tulsa has been doing that for about 5 years now. And that program is for those that are panhandling. 3 days a week, there is a van that goes around to different areas and hotspots of Oklahoma City. And the goal is that the people that are panhandling would have an opportunity to get on the van, work with the Mental Health Association staff, and clean up parks around the city that are public parks. They get lunch from the regional food bank, and then they hear about a case manager's story from Mental Health Association of their own struggles and how they overcame those, and if they want to connect with case management services or employment assistance. At the end of the day, they get $65 in cash. So that is a way that we are looking at the issue of panhandling here in Oklahoma City to encourage ways that they can get connected to other resources and find employment. And we're just now getting into our second year with that. So that is something we're still working on. It's 3 days a week, but we have heard from Mental Health Association, they often have to turn away people because people want to ride the van and want to get that cash, want to do work, and want to connect to other resources. So we know that's one way that there is a diversion from panhandling that we're working through in Oklahoma City.
Very creative program. Don't forget, you can still write on your cards. So hold them up if you've got some. We're not taking questions from the audience. You've got to write it on a card. Does the city, which are the taxpayers, still cover the cost of homeless people experiencing homelessness riding the city buses for free? Or did they ever?
So agencies like mine buy bus passes from Embark at pretty much the same level that you all do. The city does have a social services grant program that provides bus passes to agencies like mine. It's not near enough, and so we buy them. The only free bus rides that I'm aware of was during this past winter. We had our day shelter, and then we had night winter contingency shelters. And Embark ran buses between the day shelter and those night shelters, morning and evening, from November 1 to March 31, just because of the cold.
Is there a division of the Oklahoma City Police Department that specializes in people experiencing homelessness issues? And if so, what do they do?
Yes, there is the homeless outreach team. We refer to him as the hot team. So the lieutenant of the homeless outreach team standing over here by the door. It's comprised of a lieutenant, which is a first line supervisor, and he has 2 sergeants that work in there. So they're spread thin. They cover the entire city. They basically, from the time they get there to the time they get home, and then after hour things like this, they stay very busy. But so their approach is a little different than if you were to call 911 and get a patrol officer. So the first is, hey, can we help you? Can we educate you? Is there any type of enforcement needs that we need? So enforcement for us, for the homeless outreach team, is the last resort. We would like to help them first and to solve, if we can solve some of their issues or whatever, we would like to do that. So prior to Lieutenant Dale being assigned to the unit, there was just 2 in there. So when the chief made the decision to put the lieutenant in there, that basically he's committing to grow the unit. It's just unfortunate that, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there's a manpower problem in law enforcement across the country, and Oklahoma City's not spared from that, so we're significantly low. But once we start bringing new bodies in, I anticipate that expanding.
How can senior citizens, I don't know who to address this to, so I'm just going to address it to all. How can senior citizens from a church help encampments close to the church?
So one of the things that we noticed, that I noticed, or was kind of brought to my attention when I first started in this realm, was that there's like kind of a disconnect between churches and what they're doing, and we know they want to help, and what the established nonprofits are doing. So I'll just share a brief story. So I attend a church. I live in South Oklahoma City, and we were gathering backpacks to give to the homeless, and this is what they were doing. And then one day someone came and asked me what my opinion of that was. And the problem you run into is there's a disorganization, right? So my church, as an example, would go out on Thursday and say, hey, let's give these backpacks. And then your church would come out on Friday and do the same thing. And then another church would come out on Saturday. So now you have like this duplication of effort. The best thing I would say a church can do is to hook up with someone like Dan or an agency and say, hey, how can we help you to support this in the things that you're already doing? Because that disconnect, I mean, I've heard stories of like people, they think they're doing a good job and their heart is in the right place. But I've heard a story of someone taking a tin of creamed corn and setting it down on the ground and like, hey, here's some food to eat, and their heart's in the right place, but that doesn't help anybody, and it just creates a mess. And so we have a program that Oklahoma County has called Shine, that Oklahoma City contracts with to come out and clean. And so what it does is just creates these areas that we have to clean. So that's something to think about if you're a member of a church. Absolutely, we want you to minister to those folks, but I would say do it in a coordinated way by getting in touch with a nonprofit.
To this particular question of you have campers, you can call me, you can call the Action Center is probably the best call. Right now, people call me, they call Mental Health Association if they have Stefano or George's, the hot team hot team sergeants numbers, they'll call them. Pretty soon we're going to have one number for that issue. And then the information, you know, I have a church on Northwest Expressway in Rockwell. We've got some campers behind the church. I don't think they're engaged in services. Can you come out? And then my outreach team will get dispatched, or mental health associations or the VAs or whoever's out, or the hot team will go out and try to engage those people in services. And that will make that whole system much more efficient and frankly easier for citizens that aren't in the biz to know who to call.
I was chastised by somebody at this, I called it the hot team. It's a home outreach team. You don't call it homeless outreach team. And I said, what are we supposed to call it? A ho team? So I just decided to call it the hot team. I was just going to stick with that. So Lindsay, this is a question specifically for you. How long are residents placed in the rental units? And are they furnished? And then also, I think this is a valid question underneath it. Will this program compete for rental units and affordable housing for those of us that are not homeless but barely hanging on?
This is a great question. There's a lot of different points I want to kind of highlight. One of the pieces is the residents that get placed in these houses have 1 year rental subsidy. So we want to make sure that they have a year of housing along with case management services so that they can really be transition planning. Do they want to stay there? Are they getting employment? Are they finding a connection with family? What does it look like for them a year out? So the goal is 1 year. Sometimes programs are 3-6 months, and sometimes that's just not long enough for somebody to really get stabilized to know what is next and what they want to do. So it will cover 1 year. We do have move-in kits that we are excited about, and that is one way that I was thinking as well with connecting with faith communities, with neighborhoods. We know we're going to need, again, that private support. There's a lot of things that federal funds can cover, but there are limitations as to what they will cover. And this is a great way that our community can help with move-in kits. So that's something that we'll be working through so that when they move in, they have a bed, they have a dining room table, they have silverware, they have the things that they need to start feeling like it is their home. So that's really important. And then the other piece that I think is significant is as we're looking at some of these system changes that Dan mentioned along coordinated outreach, for example, we're also working on coordinated landlord engagement so that we can have, instead of agencies competing for finding housing and competing for funds, our hope is that if we get a better streamlined system, we will be able to have landlords working with partner agencies. They'll see the difference of a case manager following them along for a year and having better connections with their clients so that we find more landlords and that we have more units that are available. So the goal isn't to take away from the existing housing stock, but to increase that as we increase our, I feel like the long-term goal of being a better neighbor involves helping others become better neighbors. So that's the way we want to do that with this.
Let's see, whoever wants to answer this, but Dan, I'm going to address it to you and then maybe the others can add on as well. It's kind of a two-part question, or two different questions, but I think they go together. How did Oklahoma City homeless population grow so fast? And how does OKC's homeless compare to other cities of similar sizes?
So I expect that the question is asking why did the unsheltered population grow so fast? Because our overall numbers have not grown that much. So what really happened with the unsheltered population was, bear with me because it takes a second. So the pandemic hit, our 8 overnight shelters reduced capacity in order to enable social distancing. So, and they didn't do that by kicking people out. They just stopped taking people in. And then as people got housed, they had more room. that meant that people becoming homeless did not have shelter options. And so they camped in the woods or built a lean-to behind the church. At the same time, the CDC came out with guidance for law enforcement to say, leave the camps alone. Don't take people that are naturally isolating and try to drive them into a congregate environment where they'd be vulnerable to the virus. And that went on for 2 years. And Oklahoma City Police Department, county sheriffs, all those agencies took that to heart. And unless an encampment was a serious problem, then we left them alone. And so for 2.5 years, we kind of did not address unsheltered homelessness like we had in the past. And that led to people being more willing to do that than they had been in the past. So that was the first part of the question. What was the second part? I forget. Oh, how do we compare to other cities? So pretty good. And typically what the comparison that HUD Housing and Urban Development makes nationally is people experiencing homelessness per 100,000 or per 1,000 population. And we're a solid B plus in comparison to other cities. Largely that's been due to, for years, having a very affordable housing market. We're starting to lose that, and which is another reason why this initiative that Lindsay's been talking about is so important, because that's been our advantage for a long time, and we're about to lose that advantage.
This is for Major Dan. If homeless people are on your property, can you make them leave?
As a property owner, you have a right to press charges for trespass. So the answer would be yes. So the way that works is you would call 911. We would come out. We would, if they refuse to leave, then you would sign a citation. Essentially, you're making a citizen's arrest for trespass. So, yes.
And there's another question that backs up to that. If they have a tent, what happens to that tent and the belongings in that tent?
So if it's on your property, you could address it on your own. If we arrest them, we would, depending on the charge and how we end up handling it, we would have to take custody of it. So a lot of times in those situations, we like to try to find remedies to get them to voluntarily move on. I'd say probably 99% of the time, they're going to do that. But we're happy to come out and to mediate that.
And this is for Lindsay. How much money has been budgeted for the 2-year program to reduce chronic homelessness by 75%?
The city is still in the works for budgets. June is when it will be approved, but it did go through the initial budget that the city is providing $2 million from general funds for this. This is really significant because as the city in the past has done different initiatives, it's never given this much to one specific initiative. And I think what city leadership is saying is we hear residents, we know this is an important issue and we have to put more towards it. We also are working on federal funds that we are going to be getting in the next month to 2 months. So we'll have more to be able to share with that. But we also know that this is going to require a private donation as well that does not go through the city. It's a public-private partnership. I did bring some of these so that I can share. It has a little QR code, and it's a Communities Foundation of Oklahoma has set this up so that if people want to give, it will be going to that fund, not to the city, but the city will help administer those funds with agencies like Homeless Alliance, Mental Health Association, City Rescue, all of the agencies that are working together to work on these encampments, work with the HOT team to help house people.
Bearded Dan, did the Homeless Alliance recently receive $1 million grant? And if not, I think there's someone here that wants to give it to you.
Last fall, we got a $2.5 million grant from the Day One Families Fund, which is Jeff Bezos' money. It is restricted to housing families with children, and it is a 5-year grant. So it's 2.5 million, but it's 500,000 a year for 5 years. It's enabled us to hire what we call housing navigators, and because we're really good at housing, and so we're putting our employees at other agencies like the Diversion Hub and Palomar and YWCA to help their clients get into housing. And for the first time, we're putting our housing navigators into public schools. So Oklahoma City Public Schools, Putnam City Public Schools, and Midwest City Public Schools, because each of those schools has a fairly significant population of homeless students.
This is for Major Dan. Does the city pick up trash at the homeless sites?
So the city contracts with entities to clean up homeless sites or trash on city property. So that does not include private property. So we contract with the Oklahoma County Shine program. It's kind of a work release program. We contract for 40 hours a week. They contract with the city, and the homeless outreach team kind of picks those sites. There's a couple other, we're actually, through this relationship that we're talking about, we're trying to build with City Homeless Services. We're also building that with solid waste. So we've met with them recently to try to increase that. Solid waste is probably going to take over a lot of what they're doing with the contract with Shine, and then bring in some more things. So hopefully we'll get more cleanup and get a lot of these areas cleaned up quicker.
I also just wanted to add something that I forgot initially that I think is important in how we work with the homeless outreach team. So once we have housed individuals from a specific encampment with this initiative, we will have cleanup measures taken immediately. So the day that they are housed, we have Shine on site, as well as the homeless outreach team, as well as Public Works putting up no trespassing signs. So any of those city properties, therefore, are no longer open. So homeless outreach team helps say this site is closed. If anyone comes back to try and camp or new people come in, then we want to offer them services and connect them. So the idea is, as we move throughout encampments throughout different parts of the city, there will be areas that are closed that are redesigned for public use in a different way, instead of having more people come back in to fill that in.
The second part for that question, and I can answer if you don't want, can residents call Shine to report for a need for cleanup? I'm going to disagree.
It would be well, we don't control Shine, so I guess you could call Shine, but for our contract,
Okay.
we tell them where to go.
So for the police's contract, no, but neighborhoods can call Shine. It's called Shine, stands for Start Helping Independent Neighborhoods Everywhere. I forgot what the I stands for. SHINE. Start Helping Impacted Neighborhoods Everywhere. That's what it is. And it's Commissioner Brian Mon's program. He's got a coordinator at the office. So if you just call Brian Mon's office and ask for Shine coordinator, there are certain things that they can do. They cannot work on private property. It has to be on public property only. And if you do a cleanup in your neighborhood, they will come pick up the trash that you clean up, but it has to be on the easement. So you have to move all of that trash to an easement, totally on an easement. If it's 1 inch over on a private property, they can't pick it up. But you have to call them and talk to them about the what all they can and can't do. But they are absolutely there to help you clean up your neighborhood and have neighborhood cleanup. So call and talk to them about their perimeters and what they can do, because they are phenomenal and they will absolutely help you out. In Oklahoma County, yes. Yeah. That's all they can do. They're Oklahoma County Commissioners Brian Mon's program. How this to Lindsay? How is the tiny homes? Is there a tiny homes project? And if there is one, how's it doing? Is the question.
There are tiny homes not through the city. Pivot has tiny homes for youth and young adults that are transitioning out of foster care, or just maybe aging out of a youth shelter, or looking for longer term housing. I don't have specific data on that. I do know that once they opened 3 or 4. They were filled. Then they opened, I think they have 20. Dan, you might know more, but they had 20 and they were filled. They're incredible to look at and see the construction that has been done. I feel like Oklahoma City community really stepped up to make these true tiny homes that have everything that a youth and young adult would need. There's different models of tiny homes that around the country are called tiny homes, but they're really not safe living for many people. And so I think Pivot's done a great job with this. And I know they do workshops as well to share kind of what they've done with tiny homes.
So Lindsay's absolutely correct that the Pivot Tiny Homes project has been wildly successful. And they have plans to build more. You may have read in the paper that Veterans Villages tried to do a tiny homes project in Northeast Oklahoma City. That fell through, but I feel confident that they'll be back and do a better job of engaging their neighbors this next time. Catholic Charities is just on the front end of starting something that's very similar to tiny homes. They're called casitas, and they're prefab homes. It's almost like manufactured housing, but more sturdy. And so that will be part of the rehabilitation of Catholic Charities Sanctuary Women's Development Center.
Does anybody here on the panel see any evidence that homeless people are being bussed in from other states with a one-way ticket?
So I'm so glad this question came up. The data is super clear that it's not happening. So one of the things we do in our annual point in time count is we ask people, what was the zip code that you were last housed in? And year after year after year after year, the 75 to 80% of the total homeless population has an Oklahoma City zip code. They are our neighbors. 20%-ish are Oklahoma zip codes, but not Oklahoma City. And if you think about that, I mean, if you have serious bipolar disease in Coweta, you're coming here or Tulsa, right? Because that's where the services are. Same thing with, if you lost your job at the factory in Cole County, I mean, here's where the jobs are. And so about 20% of the population is here from Oklahoma, but not Oklahoma City. And then about 5% year after year are from out of state, almost exclusively neighboring states, Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas. And if you dig a little deeper into that, they came here for the same reason everybody else comes here, right? They had the promise of a job, or they have family here that they hoped would be able to support them. So this idea that people are bussed into Oklahoma City, that myth exists in every city across the country. Just the other day, talking to a guy from Enid who said he was braced that Oklahoma City's sending our homeless population to Enid, and I can assure you, we don't do that. But it's very common, and I honestly believe that it gets out there because it allows people to other the population, to say, these aren't our neighbors. We don't have to care about them. They're the stranger. And it's just not the case. And yeah, it just doesn't happen.
This is for Major Dan. How large is the police department's homeless task force?
Okay.
Yeah, there's 3 right now. Hopefully we'll expand. But yeah.
I thought we could expand by now.
I will tell you, every time I see Chief Gorley, I say 2 hot teams per division, 1 for 7 to 3 and 1 for 3 to 11. And he says, when I get the money. So it's a budget thing. We all know we need more, but you got to work within your budget.
And we need the people.
That's right.
Yeah, and-
So you're five, yes. A little bit sticky, but how has Governor Stitt's withdrawal of the state funding for homelessness impacted efforts? Really confident, I think this way.
So the governor didn't withdraw any funding. He dissolved the governor's interagency council on homelessness. I served on that council. I was appointed by Mary Fallon and reappointed by Mary Fallon and then reappointed by Kevin Stitt. And then this year he just decided to disband that council. That council was not a funded entity, so it didn't have a budget or anything. It was just a way for the heads of the state agencies that have some impact on homelessness. So the obvious ones like Department of Mental Health, and Department of Human Services, and Department of Rehab Services, but also maybe some of the non-obvious ones. Like one of the members of the council was the director of the State Department of Libraries. Because in a lot of small towns, libraries are the de facto day shelter for people experiencing it. So she was on the council. And it was just that they meet every other month, and it was just a way for us to all know each other. So I can remember right before the pandemic, when we had the largest prison release in American history. We let go of 400 prisoners. And those of us in the homeless business knew that some of those people were going to be discharged to homelessness, and we needed to know who they were and where they were going and how we could engage them in services. And because we had that kitch, we all knew the director of the State Department of Corrections, and we could say, hey, help us work our way through this. And so it had value in that way, but it wasn't like the council was housing 100 people a night. It was a way to make the system a little more efficient. And over time, we'll lose that. But it wasn't a money thing.
This question is going to be for Lindsay. Is the city working with newly homeless families due to financially unable to pay rising rents in the area, as opposed to the long-term street and chronically homeless?
Sure. The city has been working with those that have been affected, especially during the pandemic, with rising rent increases through emergency rental assistance. And so many of our providers worked with community cares partners in order to get that rental assistance administered to try and prevent evictions. When the moratorium was lifted, that has been a challenge, as well as those vouchers or the emergency rental assistance going away. So that is some of the challenges that we're facing. Dan can probably speak to that more, but just the reality that there was some cushion and some relief for some of those families, that now the reality is their rents are still high and they don't have that increase in income. And again, when we talk about what leads to homelessness, it is the reality that wages are not increasing oftentimes, or jobs are lost, and then rents are increasing. And, it's more complex than that for sure. But at the same time, when we're really talking about it, those are the driving factors. And the other things are often byproducts of somebody getting towards eviction. When people hear mental health, people hear substance use, yes, those are factors. But there are people that are housed that have those same experiences, those same issues, mental health issues, or substance use, that can stay housed. But when we're talking about income being lost and wages being lost and rent increasing, that is where we see homelessness come into real impact.
Lindsay's absolutely correct. That is the majority of our homeless population, right? So year after year, we see that about 40% of the total homeless population has mental illness, substance use, or both. 60% are frankly folks just like everybody in this room, indistinguishable if you saw them on the street from everybody in this room, that have fallen on hard times, have a job that pays them $10 an hour, and the car broke down and had to choose between fixing the car and making rent that month. And again, during the pandemic, the city and the state had tons of pandemic money to do prevention, homelessness prevention, to swoop in there and stop an eviction. That we'll spend our last dollar of that money in September. And rent costs are not going down drastically in September, I suspect.
I want to read a cool little story that we got. I am a resident of Mayfair West, graduated Northwest class in '92, and later became a survivor of several natural disasters in Louisiana that rendered me homeless many times. I did the homeless shelter shuffle around this country, trying to survive homelessness. After 10 years of struggle, I now operate 2 businesses and have my own home and 3 cars. I did it. Is there a mentor program of successful survivors of the homeless epidemic? Some way to show success is in the system. Is that available here? Oh,
Yeah, it's a great story. And there's not a structured mentor program that I'm aware of, but agencies like mine and City Rescue and Mental Health Association, there's a certification program called Peer Support Specialists, and it's people with lived experience of homelessness helping people who are currently homeless to navigate that complicated system. And so we employ peer support specialists. City Rescue Mission does, Mental Health Association does. It's a very effective program.
So could they contact you?
They certainly could.
Okay. So contact Dan Straughn at the Homeless Center.
And I was just going to add to that, as we have redesigned our board of directors who are really looking at strategy for the entire system, they are working alongside all of the providers, which is key. We want to make sure that we are getting directly from the field what is happening, what are the needs, and then we have people with lived expertise, lived experience on that board, and that's really significant. It's not only something to me that is HUD mandated, but more importantly, we need to know how to design programs, and the way we learn that is by people that have lived through those programs, been a part of those programs, and can tell us what works and what doesn't.
So contact Leah at the city as well. We're going to keep you busy. This is for Dan, Major Dan. If the house is vacant, can the neighbor tell them to leave and call police, or does the rightful owner have to do this?
So it would be the owner. My suggestion would be to call the Action Center. So the city has several ways to report this. Nowadays, you can do it through text message. There's an app on your phone. So you want to let the city be made aware of that, and then we would go through the process that we would need to.
Does the initiative that the city is creating include capital projects such as dwellings? And if so, where?
We currently, with this initiative, are not building. We really are looking again at units that are throughout the city to find those units and to place people into housing. Scattered site housing is a term that really, and Dan can speak to this probably even more than me, but the idea that instead of putting people that are experiencing homelessness all in one area of town, all in one apartment complex, the idea is that they would be living just like you and I in different neighborhoods. They would connect with different resources, different neighbors, and that's really a model that we believe in. We will be looking, as we're working towards this, a navigation center, and what that means is there may be a time when the site is going to be closed. We, again, move really quickly in this initiative. 3 to 6 weeks is our goal to get these sites closed. And so we know that there may be a couple people as larger encampments, and as we looked at different examples in other cities that are close to that housing, but they have 1 more week that they're working with a landlord engagement person. And so we are working with providers on a navigation center. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily a new build, but it would be a space where people could be housed for that 1, 2, 3 week interim until they get into their own unit.
I'm going to ask this, even though it's very similar to what you just answered, because I get this question all the time. There are many strip malls that have space that has been chronically vacant. couldn't this be a viable idea to repurpose and rezone these spaces into living quarters?
I will share, I love creativity and the idea that we would look at different areas of town. I think we have staff even here that know more about codes and rezoning than my expertise for sure. But I'm excited with planning, who we work with, that we are looking at that as a city. It's not a quick thing, and Dan can speak to that just on the challenges of rezoning in general. But I do think it's something that we want to think about continuously. I think, again, currently we know there are units within Oklahoma City, and one of the other pieces with this initiative is that we're trying to give people options. You know, rather than just saying this is the one place you're going, we're trying to say, where are you wanting to connect with resources? Do you have any family nearby? So we're looking at all sorts of different units throughout the city and working with a new database that we can utilize with that. But I do love the idea of a strip mall, you know, how we convert that. But there are some challenges around zoning. Is there anything you want to?
Yeah, I would say there's lots of vacant and abandoned buildings in Oklahoma City that we could consider rehabbing. It ain't free, and it's not always easy. So I just turned a 25,000 square foot warehouse into a winter shelter, and the warehouse cost $1.6 million. Put another $1 million into it to turn it into a shelter, and that's not individual units. It'd been, 5 or 6 times that to put units in there. So it's not inexpensive, but it's something that as a community we're looking at. Oh, and I would say, yeah, first you have to go to the planning department. They vet everything, and that takes a while and can be aggravating. Then you have to go to the planning commission, and lawyers try to rip you a new one. And then you have to go to the city council and gird your loins. But it can be done.
Bob, I've forgotten our time. Are we done at 7:30 or 8?
7:45.
Oh, 7:45. Cut it in half. Okay. We have so many good questions. I hope we get to a lot of them. How do you address homeless that refuse help, and that kind of goes along with that? Well, no, it doesn't really. So let's just talk about people that refuse help.
Yeah, I was going to say, we can all, you want to go first? Yeah, so I think it's a really complex answer, and so I don't think my perspective is, all of it. But I do think one of the things that we've seen with these 3 pilots, again, we know they're small. We are saying we're building our muscle in terms of this kind of work. Again, the agencies that we're working with, like Dan's agency and others, are doing great work. But this is working a little bit differently. One of the things that we've seen is of the 20 people that were engaged, 18 wanted housing and got that housing. 2 immediately left the site. It wasn't that they were refusing or fighting. They just were a little nervous around new people that were coming into their encampment and trying to connect. So I think the other piece that with the pilots that have been done in other cities is oftentimes the first time that somebody is engaging them, people aren't ready. They're not sure. There's a lot of trust again that has been broken, and there's all sorts of things that may be going on with their day. If someone approached me one day, I may be different than another day. But I think that that's where we're trying to continue to build our outreach team so that they can continue to build that trust. It takes a lot of expertise and care for those kinds of people to do this work. So I think that's one way. And then, again, we have just, for example, one woman that said, I don't want to be housed. I don't want to be housed. Up until the 3rd week, when she started to see everyone else was moving into their own, they were getting a key, they were having case management come and help move them. And we had held that apartment until the night before. And she said, I want it. And so we held it, and she got moved the next day. And so I think, again, there are people that will refuse. And that's, again, where we're so thankful that our homeless outreach team can engage if there's something that is criminal that is happening. But I also think it's how we change our approach and how we connect and build that trust.
So I would say it's important to remember that it's not against the law to be homeless. So there is no like magic wand that we can wave to remove someone. Now the things that they do, we can. That's why I think this program is so important. And, I grew up watching The Simpsons, and I remember they said, you might say no the first time, but you might say yes the 99th time. So that's kind of where we're at with this, is we want to keep engaging them until they relent and they accept things. And so that being said, if there's any type of safety issue with engagement, please call us. That's why we're here. But yeah, we can't force anybody to do anything.
Is there sheltering and short-term housing available for people with criminal backgrounds?
So the short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is it is really hard to house sex offenders in Oklahoma City. There are very few areas of the city that where that's legal. So, but other offenses, it's just one more barrier that the case managers work their way through, and we're typically able to do that.
Just want to remind everyone to please be sure and do your surveys, both the Neighborhood Alliance and the OCPD. This is how we can continue to fund these kinds of projects, is by showing our funders that we have these kinds of surveys from you, and just leave them at your seats. I'm not kicking you out right now, just reminding you you have homework to do. Let's talk a little bit about homeless. So many of the homeless have severe mental illness and they're on the streets. How are they able to make the decision to become housed with their impairments, and will they be able to be housed in this new program, in these new programs that are coming?
I can share a little and anyone else can, but I think we are aware that there are mental health and substance use challenges for those that are unhoused, and some of them are far more significant than others. One of the things we did in our third pilot that we thought was important is we worked with one of the community mental health centers to have them come alongside the outreach team and the case management. So usually someone gets housed, and this isn't always the case, but oftentimes someone gets housed and then they are asked, through assessments that our outreach and our caseworkers do, what kind of needs do they have, and then they are set up with an appointment. Maybe they're given a bus pass. But it still means that they have to go to that center. They may have nervousness around that. They may have barriers around transportation. And so one of the things that we are trying to pilot with this is how we would engage community mental health centers to come out alongside. Once outreach has built that trust and the case manager is connecting them to housing, before they are even housed, that they would get to know the person that could help them with mental health needs. So that's something new that we're doing. It's been done around the community. I'm not saying that part is new, but with this encampment initiative, we know somebody needs to be able to be stable enough to start signing that lease, getting the paperwork done. Again, they have more support than they normally do in that encampment, and this is one of the ways we're doing that.
So I would just want to make sure everybody understands that level of mental illness that you're talking about, that not competent to, just not in touch with consensus reality, that's pretty rare. So it's not rare. So when Peter Mininger opened the Mininger Clinic in Kansas in the 40s, he was given a tour to the media. This is the first big mental health hospital in the Midwest. And one of the reporters asked him, Dr. Mininger, what percentage of people have mental illness? And he said, 1 out of 1 of us, son. And I mean, we all have our issues, right? But it's not like we can't get in the car and drive down the street. And so the mental illness that we see amongst the homeless population, yes, there are a few that really believe that the CIA have put a chip in their heads and that Lindsay's trying to, cut off their feet or something. But that is super rare. Most of the people that we engage with, if we keep at it, we can get them there.
I would add that that's why incarcerating someone with these type of problems is not a pathway to better health. That's why arrest is not the answer. And then I would say that somebody in that state, the law does give police officers the ability to step in. Anybody that's out of touch with reality, a harm to themselves, a harm to somebody else, if you see that, you can call us, we can come out and evaluate, and the law does allow us to step in. It doesn't put them in jail, it gets them to a facility.
I know this is an issue because of working at Neighborhood Alliance, but when Lindsay, you talked about getting infill housing to house some of the programs that you're going to be having. What will the city do to require that the landlords and or the tenants maintain the property, especially the outside, the landscaping and the painting of the buildings?
That's a good question. As far as our connection with the landlord, we're looking at certain types of property and making sure that they pass inspection, so that's crucial. But you're talking about with the tenants specifically, or okay? I think we ask them, they sign a lease, and the reality is just like any of us here, we all keep our own home. So I think part of it is we are going to work with them. They have case managers that are working with them weekly on what that looks like to keep their own home. But I think that it's not something that the city requires specifically. We feel like they're working with that case manager, they're working with the landlord. And then part of our goal with increasing our landlord engagement teams and our caseworkers is that they have more capacity to do more home visits, to have more connection. And then again, that community mental health, if there's certain needs there, that they would get that kind of help in home. We don't have specifics on, again, what we regulate, but we are making sure that they're making those connections with the case manager and following up.
We do have a problem with landlord management in the city, and landlords get away with a lot. And that it has we have a problem in neighborhoods that have no control over landlords, and the people that have to live in those homes is really a problem. And so I can understand why some people are nervous about getting even more of those. This question is, will food be supplied when you're providing housing for the homeless? I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Sure, and before I answer that, I think you're right. There are landlords we know that are not taking care of properties. We are, I feel like, vetting those properties with the agencies that are doing the landlord engagement. So that is a piece that I think is significant, but that's something that we want to get better at. I feel like as our, we want to make sure that we're housing people into places that have heat, that have air conditioning, that have things that any of us would want. So I think that is an issue that we want to continue to work on. And as we move forward in this pilot, we will definitely see how we can address that. In terms of food, yes, all of the residents that move in receive move-in kits and are connected. We already have in our first three, I know 39% had SNAP benefits, so are connecting to those resources to be able to get groceries. But we want to do more, and I think this is where, honestly, faith communities can come in and connect. When we think through how this is going to be an effort that we need to support, we know that there's food insecurities, and that's something that we'll be working with as well.
This is for probably either Dan or anyone actually at the front. How are the MAPS funds specifically going to be used to help solve the problem?
So you have to remember, MAPS is for capital expenditures, right? And so of that $1 billion package, 55 million is for housing, and it's for either rehabbing current housing that's fallen apart or building some new low to very low income housing. But there's a bunch of projects in MAPS. Palomar is for domestic violence, and you got Boys and Girls Club, and big enhancements to public transportation systems in the city. And from my perspective, because where I stand is where I sit, those are all homeless prevention programs, right? If Boys and Girls Clubs is really effective at getting young teens to find a sense of belonging that's not a gang, man, that means 20 years later, I'm going to see them in my shelter. And so there's a lot of MAPs that will, over the next decade, have a real impact on homelessness that goes way beyond the 55 million for housing.
Two final questions. How are we addressing violence in the shelters and encampments?
are you seeing violence in the shelters? I know we've had some calls where our officers have gone out and we respond to them. So, you know, our officers are well trained, so they go out and we handle them as you know, what's appropriately. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so all the shelters, to my knowledge, employ in-house security, and it may be employees of the agencies, or like we use a contract company. In our day shelter, because we see, you know, 300 people a day, and they're mostly unsheltered folks, sometimes the anger and resentment and rubs people up against each other, and we'll have some conflicts. We're typically able to handle those. Occasionally we have to call on the police department. Over the winter, when you've got, you know, 300 people cheek by jowl in one building for 72 straight hours, things can get a little dicey. Our day shelter manager says they're sporty today. But by and large, I mean, again, people experiencing homelessness not that different from you and I, and they don't recognize that if they're in a congregate setting, there's a real advantage to keeping the peace, and they tend to do that. Partly because in the shelters, including mine, if you misbehave, we're going to put you out for the day. It's for safety reasons of the other guests and the staff, and so you may miss lunch that day. And so, especially when it's really cold, they don't want that to happen, and we don't want to have it happen. And so we don't have that much.
I was just going to add to that too. I think, you know, one of the challenges, we know that there's a need for shelter. We know that it supports people. I've been amazed when I've worked as a youth shelter director at how sometimes a new youth will come in and somebody will really welcome them and connect them. So there are those stories that we get to hear that often don't make the news. But I do think shelter and congregate settings can be a lot. I think if any of us had to live in the spaces that were constantly not ours, it would be a lot. And so that's one of the things I get really excited about with people getting the key to their apartment and the pride that they can take over this next year of building out their own home. I also think that with sanctioned encampments across the country that are popping up because people aren't sure what to do and aren't really being proactive with neighborhoods, they're not seeing less violence in encampments. The reality is, again, people are trying to get resources, they're trying to get needs met, and the challenges there, just from what we've learned so far, are taking more police effort to go into those kind of encampments. And that's why, again, housing is the solution. It's the way to go forward instead of thinking that police will need to manage encampment after encampment.
This last one is for Dan, and it's what does independent contractor mean in reference to the green vest people, which we know are the homeless problem?
Yeah, so I should make the point that flower shop, apparel, and snow cone people are actual employees of the Homeless Alliance, but our Curbside Chronicle vendors are independent contractors, and what that means is they sign a contract with us, and it is super simple. It has some requirements. You know, I won't sell after dark. I won't sell while I'm high. I won't contend with other vendors for a particular street corner, and I will engage in case management services. And then when they sign that contract, they get the first 15 copies of the magazine from us for free. And they sell them for a suggested donation of $2. And then for every, after that first 15, they buy each additional copy from us for 75 cents a copy, and again, sell them for a suggested donation of $2. So that's what I mean by independent contractors. And the reason we charge them $75 is one of the skills we're trying to teach is this idea of you've got to match income with outgo, right? And so if you're going to continue to sell, you know, you need to keep back 75 cents to get that next magazine. So trying to teach those really basic job readiness skills.
Well, before we say thank you to everybody, I want to say several of the questions were about what can neighborhoods do to help with the homelessness issue, and I want to thank you for those questions because that meant a lot coming from this audience. A lot of neighborhoods already have food pantries in their neighborhoods. Several even have menstruation pantries because it's very hard for women that are experiencing homelessness to come up with those products. The neighborhoods themselves build those and have them and stock them in their neighborhoods. So that's one way. Another way is when these homes become available and the city starts putting in infill in the neighborhoods. Remember that a lot of people that are going to be living in those have never been neighbors before, have never lived there. They're going to learn from you how to be good neighbors. Just like the Habitat infill homes, we encourage all neighborhoods that have Habitat homes, the people that move into your neighborhood, welcome them and help teach them how to be a good neighbor. Don't make fun of them when they dry their laundry on the front porch. Go in and welcome them and teach them, this is what we do in a neighborhood. This is how you become a good neighbor. We learn that from other neighbors. If you've never been a neighbor before, you don't know that. So don't just sit by and ridicule and make fun, but welcome them and teach them how to be good neighbors. I want to share a very, very short story. I live in the wonderful Las Vegas neighborhood. There's other trolley track neighbors out here that know the trolley track area. And we live close to a lot of homeless shelters. So I have homeless that walk on my streets a lot. In particular, I have one gentleman named John that we save a lot of little projects for him when he comes and knocks on our door, that we have a little jar of money that we pay him for some projects to do around our house. We dearly care about John. And every time he walks our streets, which is daily, he always throws the newspapers for everybody up on our porch. Recently had my home turns 100 next year. We had our front door redone, so it meant our front door was gone for 2 weeks. You never want that to happen. So they had a big piece of plywood in the front door, which meant to get the paper every day, I had to get anything. I had to go out the back door, out the wrought iron gate from my porch and around. So it was a pain. I walked out one Sunday and it was rainy and I wanted my Sunday paper and I didn't want to walk around to the front porch to get it, which I assumed John had put it on the porch. And instead, in my black wrought iron gate, right behind my back door, he had put it in the wrought iron gate. The homeless man was as good a neighbor as any other neighbor on my street. It still brings tears to my eyes the way I felt when I walked out that Sunday morning. So welcome everybody into your life. You never know who's a good neighbor. Welcome all of you into my life as well, and thank you for being here.
Let me say something really quick before all of you leave. There's a few people real quick I'd like to acknowledge. First, our police chaplain, David Gibson. Raise your hand real quick. He does an excellent job providing comfort, prayer, and being a listener to our many officers who sacrifice so that we live in a peaceful community. Is freedom free, ladies and gentlemen? No. Then neither is our safety and security. It comes with hard work. Another group I'd like to acknowledge real quick is the Quail Springs Baptist Church and the seniors group. Sharon Willis, raise your hand real quick. Raise your hand. This church has adopted Hefner Division and has provided so much comfort and support to our division, and the love they have shown has truly helped our officers become well-rounded and healthier officers. So thank you, Quail Springs Baptist Church. And again, I want to thank our panel here. I know you guys are doing a tough job, but we appreciate it. We're not going to solve it, but we will help mitigate it through the community, through collectively all of us working together. Thank you for making this meeting successful. You all are adjourned. Thank you.